Welcome to our Vaccine Rapid Response webinar. My name is Michael Rapoport, and joining me today are two experts from the customer experience and journey-centric case management software space. We're going to be talking about how our partnership between Genesys and Eccentex is assisting with vaccine distribution processes. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to our two participants to introduce themselves.
Michael. So my name is Max. I will be the journey-centric case management side of this webinar, and I run the product teams at Eccentex, and we're going to be kind of going through all the slides today about the vaccine screenshots and how it's affected the whole space and where we can streamline the process with our partner Genesys. So from our partner Genesys, we have Will with us.
Everybody, Will McLaughlin from Genesys. So I manage a group of sales specialists for North America for Genesys that deal with all things related to journey management, artificial intelligence, and advanced technologies. And here today to talk about how the partnership between Genesys and Eccentex can really bring you the next generation of vaccine management.
Alrighty, thanks, Will. So I want to first kind of talk about why exactly we even need this type of technology. So why can't pharmacies really just adapt their existing flu vaccine systems to address the COVID vaccination problem? And so I think that there's a number of points why the flu vaccine is really different than the COVID vaccine. And one of them is that storing the vaccine is difficult. Not only do you have there's a high risk of losing vaccine, which is in high demand, which was not the issue with the flu vaccine. So flu vaccine, there was plenty of vendors out there. They have to be stored in negative 80 degrees. And once you open them up, there's not that issue of them spoiling. With the COVID vaccine, obviously, is the whole transportation and logistics issue of this, that if you don't use them, you lose them. So the risk is high. It's important to have like operational efficiency at this point to reduce those risks.
The issues that we have here around questions that people have about the vaccine, right? The flu vaccine has been around for a long, long time. No one really has any hesitancy towards taking the flu vaccine. They're all comfortable with it. I think when we start talking about the COVID vaccine, not only are there a lot of questions, but then there's a lot of questions about which one do I want? Are there any particular side effects of a particular vaccine for me, right? And I think we're seeing this in what's happening with J&J now and it being pulled off the shelves. So not only are there just questions in general, but there are specific questions about the specific vaccines. When you go to actually scheduling your second dose, there are different requirements for the different multi-dose vendors, and people have questions about that. So you really need, a system and a set of technologies that allows you to integrate the workflow with the communication back and forth with the patient, because of all this interaction that needs to go on, right? All the questions that arise, all the scheduling, all the interactivity, that basically doesn't happen with the flu vaccine, right? The flu vaccine, you just show up and you get it. You don't even have to schedule an appointment, right? And none of this complexity really exists. And so none of the current vendors are really set up for it.
Not only are we talking about this being just a bigger scale and a more complicated process, there's also completely new features that need to be introduced, like the hot list, the wait list. There was no wait list for the flu. There was no need for one. But now, not only these existing vendors don't have that feature in the product at all. So you really need some sort of platform or product that is flexible to not only deliver these features that we know about, but the features that we don't know about in the near future that can arise, whether it becomes a twice a year type of vaccine that we need to do, whether there's more stringent follow-ups, or maybe need to in the future take a certain precautions at home, who knows? These things can arise, and you really need to have a system that can adapt to the changing environment.
Agreed. And I think, that's sort of what we're trying to illustrate here, is that we really need to enable the patient, right? And the other players here. So the facilities that are doing the appointments, as well as the doctors or RNs administering the vaccine, all these things need to be coordinated and connected in an intelligent way that adapts to all of the logistical challenges, right? Yeah, and that's really the complexity here, and it's completely different than what's ever been done with the flu vaccine, and why we think we have a pretty unique solution to this problem.
I was going to ask you, well, in terms of bots, do you think that there's a higher need for bots now than ever with this COVID vaccine?
Yeah, because I think this goes back to the point we were talking about with the questions, right? So not only do you want to be able to answer an incredibly high volume of questions, right? So that's better handled by a bot, right? It's not practical for the RNs or the doctors to field those questions, and it's probably not legal or advisable to have non-trained people answering those questions, right? So the bot provides you a high volume way to consistently answer the questions, right? Because I think that's the other thing, is that you want to make sure you're providing the same answer every time, right? So you have a consistent response back to the public, right? And the bot can adapt automatically to things like, delayed shipments, right? If someone calls in to check on their appointment and the bot can check to see if the shipment's been delayed, it could automatically set them up for rescheduling, whether that's through the bot or through an appointment coordinator, right? So I think bots and we've seen this in practice, right? The demand for bots due to COVID because of these things has been very, very high. Yeah.
I think that's possible with with all the latest bot technology, especially the ones from Genesys. You kind of see what % of stuff the bot can answer on their own, and you can really consistently improve it. If you kind of see the same questions being asked again, but the bot can't answer it, you can always see that in analytics and then constantly adjust or self-learn.
Well, and I think this is why the partnership with Eccentex is so important, is the bot has access to the state of the patient and the state of the vaccine and the state of the staff that are administering the vaccine, right? Because of the integration to Eccentex. So the bot can really be very, very smart and adapt based on all of the state of information, which we'll get into in more detail, but all of the state of the world that's maintained inside of Eccentex.
And I think one other kind of important thing to add is that a lot of these organizations that are administering these vaccines definitely facing a lot more kind of PR pressure if there is problems with scheduling, if there are problems with distribution, because as soon as any of these big kind of distributors are not providing these vaccines for people because of that high demand and because it is kind of people were very, very willing to get them and want them now. As soon as that's taken away from them, everyone kind of goes crazy, and that ends up reflecting back on the distributor or whoever is giving out these vaccines.
Well, yeah, and it's a good point, because this type of platform, right, what Genesys and Eccentex can offer can really allow you to proactively and automatically handle those situations, right? So you're really making your patients feel like, wow, they know what's going on, they're adapting, they're making sure I'm taken care of, they're aware of where I'm at in the process, right? All those things really put people more at ease, right?
Retailers, vaccine distribution administration centers already have some sort of technology in there. So we have to kind of discuss this idea of, if the pharmacy already has a patient database system or has other systems like a scheduling system that you like, or just missing maybe an orchestration layer or maybe the chatbot layer, what is we can bring to the table here? And other vendors that I've seen that kind of came out with solutions very quickly, we're kind of doing either a very specific piece of the process, or we're laying down kind of an end-to-end solution, but maybe not flexible one. So you kind of have to do everything in that system or nothing in that system, which is kind of problematic if you have a multinational organization or a big organization that kind of relies on its already existing core systems to do stuff, but are they're missing the new stuff that is needed for the COVID vaccination.
No, I think it's a great point, Max. And one of the strengths of both Genesys and Eccentex and our combined offering is both companies' approach has been to be open and flexible, right? So we can orchestrate and control a process, but use many sources of information during that, right? And integrate with those sources easily. So that's why we mentioned, Epic here, or CDC, or SAP, Microsoft, or others. We don't have to rip and replace all of your existing technology to provide the benefit to you. We can integrate easily to these systems and coordinate the process while maintaining the data in those platforms and keeping them in place, right? So one, it's a much more rapid deployment. Two, it's much more flexible, and it really allows you to leverage your existing investment and take advantage of full control and transparency to your clients in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that flexibility really I think is super important because, as we talked earlier, not only the regulations, but the type of vaccines, the various needs of data collected, what you need to integrate with, whether you need to automatically report any bad symptoms to the CDC. All those things are constantly evolving. And a lot of the stuff is manual work. So copy pasting patient information from one system to another, calling up the CDC or filling out the forms by hand, emailing patients and providers and vaccine administrators the various information. So it's a lot of these things that you kind of need a technology that can fit into your organization. So that not only comes out to be feature rich out of the box, but is also flexible enough to be within your ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think there's another key thing here, right, which is both platforms provide a security infrastructure so that you can do all of this and you can comply with HIPAA, you comply with data privacy regulations, right? You have full control of all these things, right? So that's another area where, existing flu vaccine platforms aren't, because there's none of this real interactivity, they're not designed to do all of those things, right? Whereas the combined Genesys Eccentex offering already has all those capabilities built into the platform. And we're already doing similar things for, large government and healthcare organizations. We have that experience. We know how to do those things. They're already core features of the product. And you don't have to worry about all those issues, right? As the landscape changes or CDC requirements change. What does this kind of look like? What does the employee or, end user experience look like a little bit?
We should definitely do that. I want to just quickly mention one thing right before we do that is that, one of the reasons Eccentex works with Genesys specifically on the solution is the engagement channels. So every patient will have their own source of their preferred communication channel, whether it's email, phone, text, chat, whatever it is. And not everybody, especially the disenfranchised group, may not have access to an email, but they have access to a phone that's issued to them that only has text messaging. So it's very important to provide the engagement channels that are best for the population that you're working with.
It's also important that, and this is one of the reasons this is very key, is that the experience should be consistent irregardless of which channel you come across. And we should have the ability to switch channels because of either the patient's needs or the particular situation, right? We may decide that if a vaccine shipment is delayed, the best thing to do is text everyone, right? Because if we have that communication channel for them, we know that's the thing they're most likely to see first, right? So not only to reach, the disenfranchised communities or people that only have a mobile device, but also to pick the most expedient method or the best method given a particular situation, right? And have that experience be consistent no matter what channel we choose.
Along those lines, localization and making sure that, again, people, multicultural country, making sure that when not only are the automated systems, the self-service, the chatbots are talking the language that the person understands, but also that when you do transfer to a live person or a doctor or an RN, that you're again connecting them with people who can communicate with each other on the language. So inbound, outbound. We can see that everything that is related to the vaccination is in one screen. So not only does this simplify an agent's or a doctor's view, it eliminates mistakes as well and the need to really hop between systems. So what we've seen in other organizations, in other situations, was that there's a high reliance on what we call tribal knowledge, kind of like knowing where to look. So there's an Excel file of a wait list. That the patient's information is here, but it only gets updated once a day. So you actually so if you think that something's happening, you have to go to this other system or you have to call this person, email. So it's you're trying to avoid all of that by bringing everything to the same screen. The system that we've developed together not only is self-sufficient on its own, it can collect and hold all this data, but can also bring in this same information from different systems. So if you have Epic or Cerner, or some of your data lives in Office documents, we can surface that information here onto the same screen and really bring everything together.
No, it's a great point, Max, is that, just like we can push this to a mobile phone or a portal, the chatbot could just, if you had no other way to do it, you could call in and the chatbot could walk you through this questionnaire, right, and record your answers, and it would all be consistent. Yeah.
in the language that's best for you. And, it's, if there's ever a clarification or anything, you can, very powerful stuff here. I want to mention another very popular thing that we have here is this people management system. So when this vaccination request is created, or we call them cases, are created, the list of people who are involved grows. Originally, it's just the patient and perhaps maybe an agent or not. And then it just grows and grows. So we can see who's vaccinated who. We've had a first vaccine. We can see who did it. We can see who the presiding RN was. We can see who's spoken to who. And this really helps. It helps with audits if necessary, helps to understand who someone spoke to when they say things like, I spoke to this person who told me I need to wait 4 weeks instead of 3 weeks. You have all the information here. And you can also kind of dive deeper into this. So, we can kind of see into the patient's information here that go into their profile, and we can see the other requests that they've had. So if they've had a request twice, for example, if there's duplicates, all these things are extremely important now. So you don't have people making requests at different days for the same vaccine. You don't want to overwork people. You don't want to create problems that are easily avoidable with just a system that has everything in one place.
And we can do some very smart things, right? We see, for instance, that Melissa said she had a allergic reaction to a vaccine, right? So the system can be smart and is smart and can do things like, okay, for patients to answer yes to that question, we keep them for 20 minutes after their vaccination or 30 minutes, but we also call them or text them 1 hour after that to make sure they're still okay, right? Because we know they're higher risk. All those things are automated capabilities of the platform that are very easy to enable, right? So you just have an incredible amount of power here. And not only does it create an audit trail and you can prove you've done that, but at the end of the day, you're really doing what's best for the patient, right? And doing things that are proactive, that are in the patient's best interest.
In addition to the data, I think that providing consistent service, consistent journeys, not only from the engagement side, but the overall journey, I think is as important, because it makes sure that that everything is done correctly and on time. One of the things that our platform provides is essentially this guided task list that is dynamic to the process, in this case, the vaccination. But if, for example, it's a first dose, second dose, because I have Pfizer selected here. But if I had Johnson & Johnson selected here, this section would not be here. So it's a dynamic process that then keeps everybody accountable, assigns task owners for everything, whether it's a specific person or a team of people. All this is, again, tracked back in the people section. SLAs, we know that, based on when they got the first dose, that they have to wait a certain amount of time, and that to complete the second dose, not only do you have to schedule within a certain day, but you actually have to call them days before, again, to confirm that they have a date. If they have not set a schedule, they have not scheduled a second event yet, it will essentially guides everyone on what to do. It provides that level of transparency that is necessary to do process excellence, essentially. I think this is extremely important even on scale, because resource management is both necessary for if you have a 10-person operation to a multi-thousand operation, like a large pharmacy or a retailer that has a centralized scheduling and administration management system. So you're able to, with the intelligent routing, intelligent skill-based, all these capabilities that we have in our intelligent engine, routing is probably even more important as you scale.
Well, yeah, and this is where this is so different than the flu vaccine, right? Because there's only so many slots. There's real people that have to do the administration of the vaccine, specific people. Yeah. It requires an appointment. And so when things change, it's not really practical to manually shuffle the resources around, right? You need a system which is aware of how many resources you have, what their skills and capabilities are, and where things need to be rerouted if something changes, right? It's just not practical to manage that in spreadsheets or manually or across applications. You need a unified platform, right? Otherwise, you're going to pretty much guarantee that you're going to miss SLAs, things. If a vaccine shipment gets delayed and second doses have to be rescheduled, then you may have to shift first dose patients. You need a platform that can do all of that in an automated way, or you're guaranteed to have problems like we've seen, right? Where large amounts of vaccine go to waste, or patients go longer than they should between doses, right? And we've all read about all these instances of these things happening. Well, to a large degree, that's exactly what we can prevent and make sure doesn't happen, right? Those kinds of issues, right? And all of these things. And you want a platform that can, that has a proven history of operating at scale, in mission critical applications, which we do.
Now, there's essentially, if you look at it on the surface, there's two things that this vaccine process has. One is the data that's collected, whether it's the questionnaire, whether it's patient data, regardless of where the data is coming from, but you're interested in actually collecting the data. And the second part we're going to get to next would be the workflow. Like, what are the actual steps? How do you orchestrate it? Who's responsible for what? How long are things between steps? And how do you manage exceptions? Which is probably where we have to really have a platform like this. It's not always a straight through process. We talked about, we'll keep talking about the delay shipments, which is something that is not only affecting one case, it affects many cases at once. Or if somebody cancels a vaccine, either if you have to reschedule or something, slots open up. There needs to be some sort of orchestration that goes out, finds someone on the wait list. They may accept it, but they already have, another vaccine scheduled. So there's so many things that can happen and so many exceptions. You actually really need a platform that's super flexible like this. Here, I want to kind of just talk about how it's set up. So you can see we had our forms here throughout the previous screens. We have forms that kind of indicate what the doses come from, what the appointment time, all these things are managed through these visual builders. And then you have these connected data, these tables, those one questions, those two questions, side effects, all of these things are managed from a visual interface. And, by default, when this comes out, deployed, all of this stuff is kind of managed within this application. But we can bring in data about the patient, for example, from a different system. So while we have the capabilities for this operational patient management database, I guess you would call it, if you have Epic or Cerner or another source, we can easily connect that to this system, and that data just pulls in real time to the agent's desktop or essentially the patient's vaccination card.
Well, I think there's another key thing here, Max, which is you may have, if you're a large organization, 7 or 8 patient systems. Yeah. And different patients may be in different systems. And we don't just need to integrate with one. We can support them standalone. We could integrate to 7 others. Mm-hmm. And we normalize all of that data so that then it shows up on the screen in the same way, even though on the back end it's coming from 7 different sources. Yeah. So I think that's a really key thing, right? Is that ability for the employee and patient experience to be consistent, irregardless of whether it's one source of data or 10 sources of data and different sources for different people, right? Mm-hmm. So one patient may be in Epic and one patient may be in SAP, but it doesn't matter. It still works the same way and operates the same way and is consistent, irregardless that you have patient data for different people in different applications.
So the workflows, like what steps are done, what's the delay between them? Because we said it may be a 3-4 week delay between the doses, but the actual scheduling happens before that. It's not as simple. And then there's rescheduling, there's also the exception handling. So having this visually drawn out here is especially useful as you're also adjusting it to your organization. The application does come, the solution does come with a pre-built workflow, pre-built data models, pre-built everything, but it's meant to be configurable to your organization if needed. So you can add additional delays, you can add additional bubbles, you can add additional automations. Like you may have a barcode scanner, for example, that scans every vaccine vial. You may have that little bubble in here that when that happens, it automatically captures the data after the vaccine has been administered and updates the system in some way. You can have automatic notifications here. So for example, here we have once the vaccine has been administered, to essentially immediately email the patient with essentially a confirmation. But we also have a little clock here that indicates an hour thing, essentially a timer, an SLA, So this indicates that, one day before the vaccine is scheduled to be administered, to send an email as well, and to send a SMS through a integration partner such as Twilio or Genesys, whatever other partner you have. Here we have the whole Genesys bubbles here. So to complete the dose one checklist can either be done through a chatbot, it can be done through a live agent. We can hand off here to Genesys, their intelligent contact center, to really find the best way to collect that information from the patient and bring it back into the system.
Yeah, I think it's important, Max, to note here that the system does come pre-configured with this. You could have one workflow for multiple vaccines, right? You could also, if you wanted to have different workflows for different vaccines, you can essentially use this as a template and create copies very easily and adapt them. So you could have maybe one workflow for Pfizer, one workflow for J&J if you wanted. There's a lot of flexibility here in terms of how you want to do these things, right? And how you want to modify them for whatever best suits your organization, right?
Yeah. And I think this is probably the core of all this, is the fact that while you have a pre-built out-of-the-box solution, you also have so much flexibility that you would really only expect from like a custom-built solution. But we provide that best of both worlds.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, right? I mean, the idea here is for it to be fairly out of box and make changes low code or no code, but there's no restriction from you doing anything as complicated as you want to do, right?
Yeah.
And so you can definitely adapt over time. The other thing I would say is both Genesys and Eccentex are consistently expanding the set of third-party applications that we have out-of-box integrations to. Right. So there's a whole, and we didn't really even get into that today, but there's a whole set of third-party capabilities here that we haven't even talked about that are already pre-integrated to our platforms and that people could take advantage of. Right. So, I don't think we'll go into that today, but just an incredible amount of flexibility and power, but packaged up in a way that you could get going very quickly. And then over time, add really any capabilities you want.
Just kind of talk about how do you get this solution and where it's hosted.
I think that's, one of the really nice things about this solution. And it goes back, I think, to the comment I made that, the Genesys and Eccentex approach to things has not been to create a closed system. It's been to create a flexible system that's open, that can integrate really to anything out there. And it also comes in terms of our deployment models, right? So, probably the most common one we would recommend in sort of the, maybe not standard, but most straightforward we'd say all this can be hosted in Azure. So you can just consume it as a service from Genesys' Eccentex, all hosted in Azure, right? It can also be hosted in a combination of Azure and Amazon as a software as a service, right? A platform as a service. But you can also deploy this on your own premise if you really wanted to, right? So all of this supports premise deployment. And if you have, a Kubernetes architecture or something similar, and you want to deploy these applications and manage them themselves in your own, private cloud or own private deployment, you can do that. So a lot of flexibility in how the platform can be deployed. I think for expediency, we would recommend you consume it as a service from the cloud from us, but you really do have the flexibility to consume it in whatever model you want, independent of the financial arrangements.
Yeah.
It's a subscription and consumption-based model, but you can deploy really in any architecture that suits your needs.
Yeah, and then I think that's one of the, whether it's AWS, whether it's Azure, whether it's you do a bunch of other custom hosting, whatever you want to do, it's native to all of those. And we definitely have high volumes and low volumes for all sorts of deployments. And it's not that, it's pretty big part of why we're working together, is because both of our companies are able to deploy their enterprise-grade platforms and on such a wide variety of options.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning, we do have that proven track record of very large, high volume deployments, right? Some of the biggest, highest volume enterprises in the world are using these platforms for mission critical applications every day. And so we have that track record, right? Yeah. And the experience in across the different deployment models. And also, because of the way the pricing is done and because it's consumption-based model, it's cost effective for 10-seat organization. It's also cost effective for 5,000 or 10,000 seats. You can really consume it and use it, independent of your size. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that, if you want to find out more about this solution, contact, either Eccentex or Genesys. All of us are well versed in this solution. So, so anything else we want to mention?
Yeah, no, I think we just want to say, we think this is we don't think it's a very unique offering in the market, right? It's true end customer and employee 360, all communication channels, all processes coordinated and managed in a way that you as a business have complete control, right? And transparency and adaptability. So we really do think it's very unique in the way it can be deployed, time to market, and the capabilities it provides, right?
We provide a customer success team that works with you to configure this application, get you going very quickly, and to just make the changes if you need to, train you if you want to do them yourself, or just rely on us to do it for you for now or forever. So we really have a very powerful and flexible team that can accommodate, that is ready to help you get going with this ASAP.
Yeah, and I mean, say we're definitely technological leaders in our areas, and if you consume this as a service, you get the benefit of all the research and development we're doing in the areas of artificial intelligence, bots, and automation, and process flow, in self-service, and all these things. And since we're leaders in those spaces in the combined offering, we're really providing the most advanced capabilities that exist in the market today. And we're continuing to push that every day and release new capabilities. So not only is it very capable today, it's continually providing new and interesting opportunities. Yeah.
Well, yeah, beautifully said, guys, and way to wrap it up. Thank you for coming to our webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to email any one of us. Our emails are at the beginning of the presentation. And thank you. Hope to hear from you guys soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.